Alright. So, here we are. I might as well just leave us with this. And I'm going to lower down the volume of the game while I'm here. Alright, so... Okay, so hello everyone. I'm back. And now that we've finished my playthrough of both the... of all of the endings and all of the... oh my goodness. Oh, jeez. All the endings and all the boss battles. Thankfully, we had the code to bulldoze the final boss twice, I guess. This is my favorite part of the game stream called the review. I know I've been waiting to do this for a really long time. Oh, goodness gracious. This game took until from late October to now, and it is May. The very, very first day of May, so... or the second day of May now, but... anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and discuss what I thought about the game. And my thoughts about... hello, Lucian Queen. Welcome to the stream. I'm just going to do a... this is actually the late night stream section. Oh my goodness. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the review. Talk about the game and my experience playing through it. Normally I divide it this way because this is an RPG. We'll have story. How does this work? Story, graphics, sound, and control. Kind of like gameplay and controls. And I guess I'll summarize at the end. And that's usually how I do it for these games. And this game is quite long, so this might be a little bit of a lengthier review. But anyway, so let's go ahead and start with the... so, The Legend of Sword and Fairy,仙剑, is known mostly for its stories. It's generally like very intense and very crazy. So this time, let's talk about the story for this game. I mean, it is the best part of the game, but I don't know if I feel that it lives up to the best of the series. There are some really, really great parts, and some of those endings are really like, oh, jeez. So painful. Peng Shi's ending is really, really tough to sit through. And not because it's bad, but because it's so... like, of course, I'm going to mention the endings, of course. It is nice they give you a choice of ending based on which girl you decide to pursue. You can pursue Wen Hui, or you can pursue Peng Shi. Of course, and then you'll get two endings based on that. And if you get Wen Hui and you do the secret conditions, which I did, and you absorb enough souls, you can get that ending. That's a nice ending. It's a really, like, it is a little bit of a happy ending, generally for the series, but I kind of like it. I really do hope that's the best.仙剑 3 side story. One thing I noticed is, like, as Illusion was saying, that there's a lot of story beats that are very similar to仙剑 1. So a lot of stuff you might have seen from the first game kind of show up here as well. There's both the parallels with time traveling, and you meet a lot of characters. So Dugu, who is Dugu. Oh my goodness, I keep mixing that up. You see the Situ, who is the sword immortal of wine you'll meet later in The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1. It's an older man. And of course there's Dugu, who eventually becomes the leader of the Shu Mountain Guild. And you meet him in The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1 as well. So it's kind of nice to see those people again. Of course, Sheng Gu is a younger woman in this game. And you even meet, like, let's see, He Miaoyun and her parents. Yes. Anyway, what was I going to say again? Well, I went. And of course you meet Qing'er, who is the mother of the Legend of Sword and Fairy 1's Ling'er, who is the main character, one of the main female character, also a descendant of Nuwa. And now you also learn about Li Sansi, who is the father of Li Xiaoyao, the main character of the first game, as well. And finally, you meet... yeah, that's I mean, this, and now you know why the Prison Guardian King came to be in his current position. Su Ming. It was actually interesting how they resolved it, where he was sort of like, he got his comeuppance, and more of like, he kind of walked into it on his own. So you never actually end up doing a final showdown with Su Ming, and for a long time you think he's the final boss, but eventually you realize, no, it's Liao De, who is ironically the other half of your main character's father. It's a little complicated. One thing in this game is like, oh, there's a lot of complicated things that you have to remember between each story beat. So I think, I mean, it is probably a lot of the side quests were about love and like hatred. Like, it was that thing of like people like not getting married to the first person love. It's kind of crazy, right? And about how like your relationships are formed. And like even people who are not let me see. Yeah, there's a lot of different relationships to go. So this game is very much about building relationships between yeah, I mean, Illusion Queen basically is not rattling off, but like listing the entire list of relationship charts, but that's kind of neither here nor there for the review. Like, the story is nice. Like, I think a lot of, like, barring some really illogical, there's some missteps, I think, with the whole, like, Li Gong arc, which was kind of unnecessary. I mean, I know they were trying to push the theme, but the timing of the whole timing, sometimes it didn't feel like the party members. It's like, you would think they'd be more eager, but they still go off on the side quest, and it just doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and Xiao, like the whole little Xiao like shout out in one of the Earth Meridians is kind of like, okay, cool. I mean, it does. They mean basically you must have played the third game in order to play this game like properly, because honestly, a lot of stuff will go over your head if you haven't played them. And it's also recommended that you must have played the first game as well, because a lot of stuff that they talk about here is like a precursor to what you'll see in The Legend of Sword and Fairy 1. And even so, that's why it's kind of important to know that as well. So what do I think of like overall of the story? Like, I have to say, I actually like. I think for the most part, I really did enjoy it. I think one of the few reasons pushing me through this game was really like to find out about the story. I'll go about this. One thing I don't like though is that the story beats are so far apart from. Oh yeah, I also do want to compliment like the villain. The villain, it was pretty. I mean, it's unfortunate that it turned out that way. And at first you're like, oh, Liao must be this evil guy, but it turns out like what his real story is just that he was just seeking for something, a love he lost, and he couldn't. And he was fueled by ambition he was fueled by this desire to see his past, his memories, and he did everything. For him, that was everything he needed to do. And it just went like, it would just push everything. That was his impetus for acting on his own memories, and that's really interesting. Because generally the villains in most Legend of Sword Fairy games, like in 1 we had the Bai Yuezu, who was the lunar cult leader, who was not a sympathetic character at all. He was just like a truly evil man. And then there's the false monk, with Qian Ye in the Legend of Sword Fairy 2. We also had Chonglo, who was the Legend of Sword and Fairy 3. He was also a very sympathetic character. I mean, you don't actually beat him, but it's actually really interesting like how that turned out. So he's also like 3 and 3 side story have generally pretty sympathetic villains, and that's actually one thing I really appreciated. I mean, it's too bad with Liao you don't get to see shades of it until the very end, and so for a long time he's kind of like this like, oh, he must be this truly evil person, but then you find out no, actually there are reasons why he's acting this way. The game kind of makes it, but I mean, like, this is very much a lot like the Legend of Sword Fairy 1, where a lot of key information is thrown to you at the very end. So honestly, if it wasn't separated by so much of the game itself, and like not exciting parts of the game, so basically dungeons, and if they took out like some parts that are completely unnecessary, then I think the story would have been better for it. I think if I put it together, it's actually pretty good. Like, you really do get a feel for the characters. I do have to compliment. You have a strong Oh yeah, I guess so. It's sort of weird because he's an optional boss, and you can actually lose to him and still get the final boss ending. So it's kind of funny. That's a funky setup. I actually never liked that, how the conditions worked. But anyway, you get a good feeling for all the main characters. For Lei Yunke, who's not shown here. I'll show up. I have a see. See, there's our dear friend Lei Yunke. You get a good feel for him, for Xing Xuan, especially the two brothers, Nan Gonghuang, Xing Xuan. And of course, Wen Hui and Peng Xu. Like, you have a really good... I do think, like, they managed to make everyone kind of consistent. Very consistently written. And I was, like, pretty happy about that. Though this guy talks way too much, making our translation difficulties. Ugh. Nan Gonghuang, though, he's becomes much more likable near the end. And I think, like, it's a sign of his growth. After being with through so many things and, like, running into so many people... He's a very kind of a different person near the end, and that's actually kind of nice. I mean, the other... He's a bit indecisive in terms of women, but, you know, well, that's Shinjin in a nutshell, right? Make up your mind. Anyway, the other thing to mention is that, like, my favorite character is Xing Xuan. But I do like everybody else, but Xing Xuan is awesome. Like, Xing Xuan truly, like, is probably the MVP of most of the game. A lot of stuff is because he's doing, in many ways, like, it is kind of interesting because he's sort of like, if you think about it, Xing Xuan is sort of like a parallel to Nan Gonghuang. There are twin brothers, but Xing Xuan and Nan Gonghuang couldn't be more different. And it's actually kind of nice to see that parallel. He's sort of like an ideal to strive for. And then, of course, Nan Gonghuang is sort of growing too. Because he's kind of a little on the immature side, but he starts growing more closer to that ideal. And it's actually kind of cool. Like, it parallels the player, the main characters. The endings are pretty suitably painful or happy, depending on what you want. So I think I've talked about the story enough. I don't think there's anything else I can really say about it, except that for the most part it's enjoyable. Some minor things that drive, but like, it really is the stronger part of the story. I'm not sure it quite reaches to the Legend of Sword Fairy 1 level, because like, it is compared to Legend of Sword Fairy 1, where there's a there's a marriage and a child involved. It doesn't quite get to that point where, see, you only get like the surface where you kind of get to only to the surface of where, like, their relationships could be, because he's so indecisive. They never really, you never get this feel, like, you don't get like the husband-wife dynamic that you did in the Legend of Sword Fairy 1, and that was one thing I really liked about that. So it does feel a little more like in line with other RPGs, but it's pretty good. Like, it's not my favorite of the stories, to be perfectly honest, but there are a lot of beats I really like, and the ending's a nice way to tie everything you've been through together. Anything else I want to say? I mean, like, that's pretty much it. I think in terms of, like, I don't know, does it compare to 3? It might be. 3 was more about past lives, and this is more about current relationships. So it's really, they're two different themes. It's really hard to compare. Otherwise, yeah, I think everything is covered pretty. Everything is covered, like, there's not too many. They pretty much solve a lot of what we were thinking about. So it's pretty cool. Let's see. So let me go on to graphics and sound. So graphics, well, given the time it's in, it's kind of a little lackluster for what period of time this game came out. Because let me see. This game came out in like 03 or I think it was 04 or 05. And by that point, like, we were past into the PlayStation 2 and like we were getting close to the Wii, like we'll eventually get to the PlayStation 3 era. Seriously, that was... So these graphics are kind of lackluster. Honestly, a lot... Yeah, 04. So we were dealing with, like, the midway through we were dealing with the PlayStation 2 era, or the Xbox One or the GameCube. The Xbox original and the GameCube. And I don't know. I don't think for a PC game the graphics aren't really good. I feel like the models did a disservice to a lot of the, because the animation's so blocky and like it just didn't feel smooth, and the models are just chibified, so you lose a lot of detail. So like the portraits are really nice and detailed and nice looking, but then the rest of the game, the models just don't stand up, and so it just looks kind of weird. And sometimes in some scenes you couldn't tell what was going on because the models were not expressive enough, and you had to read the words, and it just causes you to miss some certain details. And it's kind of unfortunate too. I mean, this is kind of mostly going to be addressed later in the later games, but it's not a good look, honestly. I'm really not happy. It's really kind of and I feel bad because like they just, like, this story could have used that to make certain things more expressive. So you just lose a lot of the gravity of the whole thing. Like, just these things that kind of take you out of the immersion. The other thing to mention is that I'll make a minor... This isn't really a... This is more of an opinion of mine. I don't actually like the character designs from this game in particular. I'm not a real... I really think it's not quite as, like... It's a little on the servicey side for me. And, like, I don't think it looks as nice as some of the previous designs we've had to do. I mean, there are designs that are like, okay, this is kind of like servicey, but it's like not... I don't know. I feel like I don't really like the character designs in this game very much. And I have seen some stuff from later. Later on, there's a few things... 4 is going to be a whole different story, but I'll talk about 4 when we get to it. Let's see. I think 1 has a nice simplicity, and 2 is okay. 2 is pretty good. Like, I think the sprite work helped a lot to hook it in. 3 had pretty good designs, and then 4, I'm not sure I'd like it very much. Let's see. But yeah, for graphics, I think also, like, one other thing to mention about graphics is because of the way it works. Sometimes it was not clear whether you can walk past certain things or how to interact with things, because they're all like this really awkward modeling. And so you lose that sense. Sometimes you can't tell if something's actually... You can... Okay, at least the one thing they improve is that you can kind of tell if you need to touch something. But other times there are vines that you can't go up and that you could go up, and like there's arrows to tell you, but it's kind of... You get this weird... It's just kind of lame. You have to use the arrows to figure it out. And it doesn't look nice or aesthetically pleasing. So I really think the graphics does do a big disservice to the game. This is that awkward 3D and between 3D and 2D phase that's really that a lot of PlayStation 1 era things had to go through. So it could have been better, and I think everything suffers for it, including the dungeons as well. So hopefully for the best, the future games will kind of improve on it. I mean, 4 does look better than this, but we'll talk about that when I get there. I am comparing a lot to 4. And it's basically the same engine as 3, so they basically kind of look the same. Let me see, what's the next? I think the next one is sound. As always, this game always has rocking tunes. Rocking tunes. Always has really nice music. They'd be worthy of going into a soundtrack, and it would be really, really... Of course, it would be really, really nice. Let me see, what was I going to say again? Why am I blanking? Oh, yeah, and, I don't have anything real else to say about the music. It's great. What I don't appreciate as much is the fact that some of the sounds of the monsters get a little bit generic. Like, some of them are matched the monster, and other times they don't. And it's just weird and immersion breaking for me. It's a minor thing. It's really minor, but like there's a lot of reuse of sounds, and there's not enough unique monster sounds, and it's a little odd. And I mean, that's pretty much it for that. I mean, there's not much else to say about the sound. Like, the sound effects work, and you can hear... At least things are pretty interactable. And, yeah, I have nothing else but bad to say about it, or good. I'm good. All the good things is just, like, it works. All right, finally, we're gonna go with... we're gonna go with controls first. Oh, once again, this game has roughly the same... Yeah, the toads that sound like women. It's so immersion breaking. It's really weird. If they fix that for future games, then that would be nice. It always was bothersome that they sound so strange. They're not a... The sound effects are kind of worse. Anyway, the next thing I want to say is about controls. Why this game? This game has a pretty... The mouse controls are pretty bad. Like, honestly, a lot of times I had to fight the controls to get the character to move, and it's just not good. It's cumbersome and it's hard to move, and then it makes it harder to run away from enemies because sometimes your character will start running in a different way if you don't tap it correctly. So it's really not a very good system. You can use WASD and that does help, but it is kind of cumbersome. The spinning of the camera is fine, I guess. And that's okay, but moving around is such a chore. And sometimes the worst is that your character doesn't move to an item, even though there's a clear path to get to it. It's so annoying. It's a pain in the butt to play this game. It's very similar to the same faults as 3. I harped upon it when I was playing The Legend of Sword and Fairy 3. But 3 Side Story also suffer from the same problems, so it's just not a pleasant experience. And like I'm fighting the controls half the time, and it's just not very fun. I also think that the inventory is fine. Like the managing inventory is fine. It's just basically moving around. Outside of battle is just a tremendous pain, and I kind of hurts the game a lot in terms of playability. Anything else I wanted to say about that? Yeah, I think... Let me go ahead and move into gameplay, because this is sort of related to it. Alright. Yeah, the character just wouldn't go and switch it on. Yeah, that's true, too. Tapping on things is just a pain in the butt, and people won't do it because they're like, the game says, like, you're too far, and it's stupid. You'll be right next to something, and it doesn't work. It drives me crazy. So the control in this game was clearly like not tested well enough, or they thought, oh, it's good enough, we'll just put it in the game, and then it feels sloppy and unpolished, and it really should be better considering there are many other games they could have built on or learned from, but nevertheless, it's a fault here, and I gotta point it out. Alright, we're going to talk about the gameplay, because this is sort of related to how the controls work. Oh gosh. Spinning the camera is good until your view is blocked by a 3D model. What happens oftentimes is that in dungeons, a lot of times things block your view and also get in the way of the controls because they don't make the models transparent in front of your player. So your player is not visible at all times, and it just makes the controls even worse. So you can't move around. You're this awkward WASD to hope to get through, and it's just like it's kind of like a workaround, and it's not very good at all, and that drives me crazy. The other thing to mention is that the minimap once again is completely useless. It's pretty useless. You can't zoom in and can't zoom out, so you can't get a good feel of where you are. So it just made finding things in this game a complete chore to do, like the third game. I'm really unhappy about that. And they should have improved it, but it's not improved. And it sucks just like the third one too. It's good enough to find most things, but it zooms in too much, so you lose your sense of direction. And also you're not... Because of the way, like, it's hard to tell which direction you're going on the mini-maps, because there's not like a cone of view, which would tell you where you're going, which is what other games do. So, it's so bad. And like, if you look at other games around this era, there were like Metal Gear Solid 2, and then you could have seen something pretty good. But it didn't do it, so I'm going to ding the game for that. Oh, yes, and I've got another thing to talk about for the battle system. Once again, it's a good attempt at being different from the previous games. And it's the same as the third game, but once again, the animation timing is really janky. So sometimes there's just these weird situations where the animation's still playing and then you can't interrupt them fast enough, and it's really, really odd. you kind of get quirks with the timing, unlike in regular Grandia where you can kind of stop them. Or Child of Light actually has a good version, a really nice version where you can actually, where you're very guaranteed to be able to stop an attack if you're right in between, so you don't have to worry about an animation playing too long and it can't stop anything, which is really silly. So that's also another thing. The battle system has its own quirks. Finally for the gameplay, there's more I can say too. Oh gosh, the number one fault about this game is that it's too long. Guys, allow me to tell you why it's too long. Here, 91 hours. Okay, divide that in half maybe for like, or like maybe knock off like 30 or 40 hours because we translated. But this game is way too long. That's the number one problem with the gameplay. All the story beats are so one thing is that the story suffers for doing this, because I start losing track of all the details because it takes so long to get from one part of the story to another, because the dungeons are way too long and there's way too many of them. I get that they wanted the Earth Meridians to be dungeons, but this game just is dungeon bloat. Like, it's worse than the third game in terms. The third game is much better paced because the dungeons didn't take this long. If the dungeons were at the level, maybe at the like half their length or like 1/4 the length in some cases, like the Earth Meridians there's so many Earth Meridians, they could have just made each of those dungeons like smaller pieces, because an Earth Meridian shouldn't be so large, and it doesn't make any sense that they made it so long. It's basically filler. The worst part is that the battle strategy is the same. You use generally the same battle strategies to get through it, so it gets really monotonous. And it's hard to avoid enemies in those little tiny corridors. And the other thing is, like, the dungeons are so long and like they drop you things and enemies respawn. It's hell to go through, and that's why we start throwing them into this slot, because it was boring on the mainstream to watch me do the dungeons, and like it became really unfun. I think that single-handedly, like just how many dungeons and how long they are, single-handedly almost ruined the experience for me in this game, and I'm almost wondering if this was a positive experience at all. Like, I'm kind of 50-50. I hate to be mean, but if the dungeons almost ruined the game, it's just too long. And like there's too many of them too. So I've already complained about this multiple times, so this should not come as a surprise to some of you if you've watched me been playing this game, but oh my gosh, this is the definition of dungeon bloat, and it almost could ruin the entire story's pacing. So it just becomes a freaking mess. And it shouldn't have been this way. So I'm just really disappointed in terms of pacing. Like, they nailed pacing down much better in like 2 and 3, where like dungeons didn't take this long, so they were like a nice it was still a nice pace where there was like a lot of story going that could actually get you through, even though the dungeons are boring. I think the worst part is it's just impossible to avoid encounters, so you're just motivated to just... You can accidentally grind like I did, and then you'll be overpowered. And you can even kill secret bosses just by leveling normally. And because there's so many dungeons and so many enemies, you get over-leveled, and then the difficulty of the game just stops dropping and dropping after a while because you're fighting so many things. So you get overpowered, and the game becomes really, really easy. And it's just kind of funky. That's just so, like, the tuning was just totally off. I hate to be so critical about it, but yeah, the pacing of the game is just completely wonky. And then let me think. Anything else I want to say about that? Yeah, I mean, too little story in between dungeons and too much dungeons. So honestly, this game suffers for it. So what do I think about all this? So generally, I'm torn. I might actually... This was almost like a negative experience. Like, it is not the worst. I don't like. There are other games that I've played that I didn't enjoy as much, like. But I think the fault of this game is just the length of the game just made me start not disliking the game, playing the game. Like I actually was starting to, at some point, after a certain amount of time, I started dreading playing the game, even though I was still somewhat kept interested in the story, but the little drip of story just started like wearing on me. So it became, this game really wore me out in terms of it. So it was almost, I think it might be mostly a negative experience where I started not liking what I was playing. And I feel bad too, because I really do like the other games, and I wanted to like this. The story is good. It's the only motivator for me to get through this. So it's kind of like it's a very similar problem to what I had with Xenogears, except it's still, to be fair, at least this game's story is complete, and you got to see all the beats as you went. Xenogears suffers for a different reason, where they rushed the story because they had no budget. So at the very least, this game at least gives you the whole complete picture, and you get a nice assortment of endings, and you get really... So this game might still be a more positive experience than Xenogears, but it wasn't a very positive experience overall, and I feel really bad about that. So I honestly think that you might actually be, if you didn't want to deal with this crap, I mean, the conditions for getting the endings are pretty weird too. Like having to absorb so many things, this feels a little bit like a chore. But it's not that bad, because once you realize that absorbing is so overpowered, it makes the game too easy. So I guess it kind of evens out, right? And so overall, I don't know if I can like Xenogears. I might recommend it. I mean, by that tone, I should say that this game is worth playing, but only if you're really... I would think, like, this is sort of like one of those things, like, if I had to choose whether to buy or rent this game, I'd probably just rent it. Like, it is kind of like almost it's either like a thumbs up rent with a lot of conditions. As in, like, if you are a diehard fan of the series, it might be worth your time to play this. Like, this is my overall feeling about it. Like, if you're a diehard fan of the series, then you might really like, you could appreciate it. If you're willing to patiently put up your time to do this, then it's worth going through. It's worth your time. You feel it's worth it, then you'll be okay. If you're patient and you're willing to grind, you can get through and play the nice story. If you are anybody else, like if you don't want to slog, and you're interested in the story but you don't want to slog through it, and you don't want to, if you're not really a diehard fan, or like you must have to play previous games in the series to really appreciate this, because this, without it, the game throws a lot of references and you won't understand them off the top. Let's see, what else I gotta say again. So for everybody else who is like, if you're not a fan of RPGs, or you only want something that's a bit shorter to digest, this is probably not the game for you. And if you're one of those people who are like, I like the story but I don't want to play, are impatient and you don't want to slog, if you don't want to deal with this slog, you might as well just watch the story on YouTube, because that's probably the best part of the game. And if you don't want to fight through it, then you shouldn't, then don't bother. And it's sad too, because like I wouldn't say this about any of the other games. It's just this one just it just hurt me. So I'm sad to say that it was not quite a positive experience for the most part, but there are parts I really enjoyed, and I'm happy it's ended the way it did. The endings certainly do at least make me feel better about what I've done. The ending payoff is pretty good. It's nice to get everything kind of tied up, so I have to give them props for that. And yeah, I think there isn't much else to say. I guess for diehard fan, thumbs up, rent. not diehard fan, thumbs down Rent. And yeah, thumbs down Red for everybody else. There's too many faults for me to fully ignore. I can't in good faith really tell you. It's not a front to anybody who likes this game, by the way. I want to make sure that you're all happy, and I'm not vicious gonna post a hate campaign about this game right now on Facebook or Twitter. So I do know that the future is brighter later on. We do have after this game is the 4, which is known to be pretty amazing story wise. I have seen quite a bit of it, so I do know we're in for a better time in 4 at least. I don't know about the other games beyond this. I won't talk about them because I have no experience with them. So yeah, there you go. With that, I think we can end my review. And yeah, thank you. I'm glad we're done. Thanks everyone who is watching me play this. All right.